What's up, heathens? Let's talk about one of the most bizarrely narcissistic things some people say after a tragedy. I want you to imagine a tornado or wildfire as it tears through a neighborhood. Homes destroyed, families devastated, lives lost. It shouldn't be too hard because disasters like this always happen for various reasons. And in the middle of it all, someone proudly announces, "God protected my house," or "God protected this Bible," or any number of proclamations made by religious folks when nature strikes. Really? God skipped saving lives but ensured your deck furniture wasn't scratched? Think about what that claim implies. God specifically chose to save your trivial material possessions, but decided to let men, women, and children die? He stood by and watched as your neighbors' homes were flattened, burned, and their lives lost. Does your God care more about inconsequential material things than he does about innocent lives? So either God plays favorites with property values, or he's the celestial equivalent of a slumlord who only fixes your leaky roof while ignoring everyone else's collapsing walls. And it's not just self-centered, it's outright insulting. God saved a Bible while someone else dies? That's not something to be celebrated. It's cosmic narcissism. You're turning God into a materialistic micromanager who cares more about your siding with someone, who cares more about your siding than someone's loved ones. Here's the truth. Disasters don't come with divine preference. Tornadoes or wildfires don't steer around the houses of the faithful. Instead of crediting God for sparing your patio, maybe focus on helping the people whose lives have been completely shattered. Because at the end of the day, it's not divine intervention that rebuilds homes or saves lives. It's human compassion. And that's something that we can all get behind. If you think God plays favorites with natural disasters, we want to hear from you. The show starts now.
Welcome, everybody. Today's January 19th, 2025. I'm your host, the Cross Examiner. This is my co-host, the Godless Engineer. How you doing, Godless?
I'm doing really good. I'm really excited for the show today. I can't wait to get to all of the callers that are calling in currently, and just excited in general.
Oh, excellent. I loved your cold open. I've been dealing with like memes about that all week. People sort of posting things at you about, hey, look, this Bible survived or this house was unburned. And half of them are just fake. The other half are, I respond back with a meme that's burn down McDonald's, except the Ronald McDonald statue in the playground is perfectly preserved. And like, hey, if Ronald needs to be worshipped if he survives. So, it really gets my goat when they get after that. And I think your characterization of it as narcissistic is also really telling. Have you run into a lot of people that sort of try to support that view? Like, I know you deal with a lot of callers.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's always people out there that want to think that, their God is specifically doing things to make their lives better. And they don't sit there and try to consider what that means, like for other people that are in similar situations or in worse situations. And, especially when it really gets my goat whenever somebody is saying these kind of things about like cancer survivors or somebody that's going through chemo. People are sitting there and they're fighting for their lives. And apparently God specifically chooses one person for what seems to be no reason at all to save their life, but allows a child to like succumb to cancer. It's narcissistic, and it can be pretty disgusting at times.
It's funny you mention that. I don't know if you know this, but I happen to be a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when I was 39 years old. Not once did I start to pray or question why or anything. I just went straight to the professionals and asked them what the science said and followed that. And I won a genetic lottery. The chemo worked on my body and I got better. But I was surrounded by people who were insisting that I got better because they prayed for me. It was very frustrating. And I'm like,
yeah, I'm sure it was.
it's maddening. You're like, thank you, but okay. Anyway, so I should point out first that the Atheist Experience is a product of the atheist community of Austin. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And that's of big importance because tomorrow is a historic day. We've got January 20th, a new administration's coming into office that previously claimed ignorance about the Heritage Foundation and their Project 2025 document, but have since placed at least 8 members of the Project 2025 team into the cabinet and hundreds into the administration. So it is a very important day for people who are interested in preserving the separation of church and state. So that's something that we should all be keeping an eye on. Put it this way, the Heritage Foundation, which wrote it, was created in 1973 because they thought Nixon was too liberal. Literally. So that's the people who thought Nixon wasn't conservative enough wrote Project 2025, and they're now all coming into government, and we need to monitor what they're doing and come up with plans on how to push back against that. I don't know if you've seen any chatter on your feeds or channels about that yet, John?
Well, yeah. So Project 2025 is all over the place, and I actually started reading the first part of it, and ironically, it actually says that in Project 2025 at the very beginning, like it talks about their problems with the administration previous to Reagan, and they started, during Reagan's presidency, they wrote the first mandate for leadership then, and it's like everything that's been in the mandate for leadership has been like in it for a long time. And so they're always fighting to like overturn a lot of these social programs, and they're always doing that. So I have been seeing a good bit, of talk on it, either, denial coming from some and affirmation of like our worst fears from others. So I have seen that on my feeds. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of people don't realize that Heritage Foundation has been publishing these policy documents, these volumes. This is like the 7th or 8th one, if I recall correctly, since the Reagan era. And this is the first one that became infamous because it was so blatantly out there. It was so, they don't mention the word Christian nationalism in the document. And if you search for Christian religion, I only found a few instances of it, and it was sort of side stuff. But what it is it's definitely a policy to say, we are going to neuter the government so that when we do unconstitutional things, there'll be no consequence. There'll be no recourse. We're going to create a playground where we can do whatever we want, and the people will not be able to stop us. And that's what's going to play out. And we need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and I think that everybody can really, look to a lot of like textual criticism as far as like when we're analyzing documents to see like, well, did one document like influence another document? There's this thing called parallelomania, where you invent connections, right? So this is what a lot of people are saying about like our connections between Project 2025 and the agenda of the incoming president. But like where it's not parallelomania is where it's like, when it's the exact same things that are said in the exact same order for the exact same reasons, like that's no longer like coincidental. That is like direct connection. And so that's where I stand on it.
It reminds me of the textbooks of Pandas and People, I think it was called, back during the Dover trial regarding creationism versus intelligent design, where they introduced evidence that they had this creationist textbook that used the word creationism. And then when they lost some sort of case or their policy came out against it, they went and did a Control F find and replace and changed creationism to intelligent design. But the rest of the text was identical. And this was introduced as evidence at trial before a Reagan appointed judge, a federal judge, who just trashed them and said, hey, you're just smuggling your religion in through science. So that's exactly the same thing. You just find and replace whatever word and everything else remains the same. You've got to come to some conclusions about, you're not making a new document. You are just rebranding your old ideas, your old arguments. All right. So before we get going further, we do always every week we do a question of the week. All right. So last week we had a question that said, what would Jesus do? The classic, what would Jesus do? Wrong answers only. And here are our 3 favorite responses chosen by one of our great hosts, Johnny P. Angel. So we're not responsible for this. You can hate on him if you didn't get the placement you thought you deserved. Number 3 was Dwayne Johnson. I didn't know he was a viewer. What would Jesus do? Jesus would give a holy crap. I guess that's both figuratively and literally. I think he would care, and I do think he would probably give a holy crap, so to speak. So that's a good one. Number 2, T800 Phantasm. I assume that's Terminator 800. What would Jesus do? Admit it was an erection and not a resurrection. Womp womp. Johnny Angel picked that one for number 2. So what was number 1? I hear you asking. Blah, blah responded with the number 1 response. And blah, blah said, what would Jesus do? Tip well at a strip club. And I actually kind of agree with that. Jesus, if he was anything in the Bible, was a healer and hung out with the ne'er-do-wells that society didn't want to deal with. So maybe he would tip well at a strip club. I'm not saying that just people at strip clubs are ne'er-do-wells that society wouldn't want to deal with everywhere, but certainly that's what Christians view them as, or at least purported Christians. All but the Christians who are actually at the strip club, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So those are great answers, but we do have a new one this week. So I'm going to give this one to you, John, first chance to answer. And for those of you listening, you can respond by putting your answer in the comments to our video, not the live chat, but the comments, so we can review them, and they'll be there for maybe Johnny Angel to pick a new penis joke or something different this week. We'll see. And the question is this for John: if Allah allowed us to create one additional prohibition, a fatwa, what should it be?
You know, every fiber of my being says that the fatwa should be that you shouldn't hit up your technologically savvy friends and family members to fix your printer. Nobody wants to fix a printer, especially if it's a Wi-Fi printer or any other kind of technological thing that you can't figure out. Like, we charge by the hour for that. Okay, I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the penalty should be, but definitely more than like 15 shekels, a little less than maybe death penalty, but pretty severe. I agree with you. What do you guys think? What does our audience think? I don't know if we can do better than that, but here's the question for the week. Please put your answer in the comments below. If Allah allowed us to create one additional prohibition, a fatwa, what should it be? So thank you so much, John, for that one. What do you think? Should we take a call? We got a lot of calls piling up already.
I'm ready for a call. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm going to talk to Stephen from New York, whose comment says atheists don't need to fear religion. So on one hand, I want to disagree with the premise of the question and say, do I fear religion? And maybe I do or I don't. We haven't established that yet. But I also want to know what you mean by that. So why don't we ask Stephen, are you with us? And can you tell me, is that what your argument is? And why don't? Well, first of all, why do you think that atheists fear religion? What does that mean? And then why shouldn't we?
I don't know. A lot of times I've seen atheists be really frightened by religion in the way they speak about it, and I don't think they have to fear it, because I think fearing religion is a reversed form of cherry picking.
How so?
They're focusing on bad parts of religion, and then. And they fear the thing as a whole, and I don't think that's necessary.
So if to go with your analogy about cherry picking, if I went to John and said, John, I've been eating a lot of McDonald's and I think it's great. It tastes wonderful. It's convenient. It's relatively cheap compared to other restaurants. And John said, but Graham, that's why you're fat. You need to cut down on it. It's going to kill you. It's going to put you in an early grave. Is that cherry picking, or is he expressing the concerns about, hey, there's some really bad stuff in there, and so you shouldn't do it? Is he cherry picking?
No, that's completely different, because that is definitely going to happen. with that example. Like with religion, even though you may not find it as dazzling, I guess you don't have to throw confetti in the air about it. But I really don't think it's important to. I don't think you should be afraid of religion. I think it is a form of cherry picking.
Right. Okay. So for one thing, like I'm not afraid of religion, I would say, and I'm not going to speak for cross-examiner here, but like I'm not afraid of religion, but I would say that I am afraid of like other individuals that are implementing that, like the implementation of the religion by certain people and how they are interpreting it. So like that would be the thing that I'm afraid of. I wouldn't be afraid of the religion itself. And I definitely do point out like the numerous moral failings of the various religions that are out there, like the Abrahamic religions, which I'm sure is probably what you're most familiar with, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, those kinds of religions. I point out the moral failings of them and the possible problems that they pose. Do you think that it's cherry picking to like notice the immorality that the God described by a religious text promotes and endorses, and then say, oh, well, that's a bad moral foundation because he has these definitely immoral things a part of it? So like, would you consider that cherry picking to point out the moral failings and then, say that this is not a good moral system?
I mean, if you consider it legends and you don't believe in it, I think it is cherry picking because there are also good things in the Bible as well. Not it's not as black and white as.
I'm going to go back to the McDonald's analogy again. There's great things about McDonald's. All right, I love their cheeseburgers. They make a decent shake when the machine's working, but it'll kill you if you eat it all day long, right? So I think the argument we're trying to make is you seem to call this cherry picking when we seem to say, hey, maybe there's some good in there. We can debate that. But there's a lot of bad stuff. And what we see in the world is people who believe that they understand the mind of a God, and they do things like fly planes into buildings because of that understanding. And that's the concern. I don't think I fear, like I agree with John. I wouldn't say I fear religion. I fear what people do in the name of religion. And I don't want to hear any no true Scotsman analogies. We can cite 8 million different things as results of what people have done, both to kill themselves or kill other people or harm themselves in the name of belief in something where you don't have sufficient evidence. And it doesn't even have to be religion. It can be anti-vaxxers, right? They have killed grandparents. They have killed children because they believe something based on insufficient evidence. And that is my biggest concern. And I just got through talking about an organization that is openly said they want to change our government starting tomorrow to do away with the First Amendment. So yeah, I'm worried about that. That's not cherry picking. That is saying we need to be worried about this. Are you instead arguing we should also, if we are going to say this part is bad, that we are somehow morally bound to celebrate or talk about a perceived good part? Is that what your argument is?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like I kind of like certain things about religion. Like, for example, churches are really interesting to me. I like the glint of the candles and the stained glass.
So can you do all of that without religion? Can you go and create a community that gathers together and sings songs and lights candles and do all of that stuff without saying we're doing this because there's an all-knowing being and we understand what they want? Can you do that?
I mean, it's heavily associated with religion. So
it's not my question. Can you do it?
I guess
the answer is yes. The answer that you don't want to give is yes, you can. I've done it. Google Sunday Assembly. Google the Unitarian Church, which still has some stuff, but they are very much on the end of the spectrum of like, we're not going to talk about God. Google atheist gatherings. Google rock concerts. I just went to the Sphere a month ago. My friend took me as a gift, actually a celebration of me being 15 years cancer free. Took me to the Sphere to see the Eagles, which was the soundtrack of our collective childhood. And I had what other people might describe as a spiritual experience, right? It was amazing. I was blown away. The music was amazing. The rock stars were still in tip-top form. And I did all of that without any belief in a God. So yes, you can still do those things. What can you do with religion that you can't do without religion? What does it gain?
Well, I mean, I guess religion has a lot of history. Like there's a lot of, there's a lot of written text that has carried on for millennia, I guess.
What can you do? What can a person do with religion that they can't do without belief in a God?
How can it's hard to explain. I don't know.
Let me suggest something, and I'd love to hear John's take on this. What I'm hearing from you is a general affection for, I'm presuming, your perception of religion and your religious history and things like that, that there's some affection there. There's something you like about it. And you're trying to, I think, mentally defend that. And correct me if I'm wrong. But when I'm asking you questions that are fairly simple, like there's nothing that a religion gets you. One might argue flying planes into buildings. You don't do that if you don't believe in God. But I'm sure there's non-believing people who have killed themselves and others because they are crazy, right? I don't want to equate crazy and religion, but there you have it. John, what are your thoughts? What is this caller struggling with? Because it seems like they don't really have an idea of what they want to say.
Well, yeah. So I feel like the caller here, you're basically trying to solve what you perceive to be cherry picking with just suggesting more cherry picking.
Yep.
Also, I would want to ask Stephen here, what part of the Bible is good enough to overshadow or to warrant ignoring the worst parts of the Bible? So let's just take one particular part of the Bible. If you go to the Ten Commandments, which Christians love to use all the time, especially in public schools, it lists women as property there, and it treats women as property. And the way that women are treated in the Bible is definitely wrong, and specifically in the way that they take possession of women. And so, like, what facet of the Bible of Christian theology makes it okay to treat women as property, to forcefully take a woman as a wife by raping her? Like, what in the Bible makes that okay? That's the question that I have for Stephen.
I see. I view that as cherry picking because
I was going to say I'm going to cut you off if you say cherry picking. It's a legit question. It's again like, hey, McDonald's will kill you. Yeah, but it tastes good, and you're just focusing on the death part. I hope this is coming through. Like, hey, religion makes me feel good. Yeah, but it has justified demeaning women for thousands of years. It was used to justify slavery in the United States, not a couple of hundred years ago. It was used, today to justify taking over our government. That's not cherry picking. That's the problem. You got to be able to talk about the problem. So stop saying cherry picking and answer John's question. What is so good about the Bible that justifies all the bad shit? Example one, the demeaning of women, the lowering of women in the status of the human race.
Well, it says don't steal, love thy neighbor.
How does either of those apply?
We had those rules written down on Sumerian tablets thousands of years ago, 500 to 800 years before the time of Moses, which, by the way, we don't even know when he was. So that's nothing new or unique to the Bible. People have known how that you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, all of those things long before the Bible. What does the Bible bring that's new and unique that makes up for all the bad parts?
I mean, even whether or not it's real, it does. It bring a story of like Adam and Eve and how the world came to be, which
So does science, and science has evidence to prove that it's true.
Yeah, but
like literally because you want a just so story to make you feel better, you think that justifies saying that women are property and that owning slaves is okay? Like that's your argument?
No, those things are not good. But most Christians don't think that. They don't have that opinion.
Don't have what opinion?
They don't discriminate against women, and they're not pro-slavery or anything like that. So that's
well. But can we both agree that those are relatively new developments in Christianity? Like that's not indicative. Like I feel like now you're cherry picking Christian history.
I want John to continue, but I'm actually going to disagree with you on point one that most Christians today do not discriminate against women. I'm going to say I don't think you can prove that because of the massive amount of I am the head of the household. Show me all the female popes and we'll talk.
Right. No, yeah, I disagree with the first premise too, but even granting the first premise, I mean, you would be similarly committing a cherry picking fallacy to just only focus on the more modern, more contemporary implementations of Christianity while totally ignoring the vast Christian history that has subjugated women, that has, slaughtered entire groups of people, known as genocide, that has pushed its religion violently on groups of people, that continues to this day to push for missionaries to go out and force religion on people. I mean, I've talked to somebody before that has subverted somebody where he's in a foreign land and he doesn't know the language, and so he has somebody write like something about Jesus Christ on a piece of paper, hands it to them, gets them to translate it for them as a way to witness to them. So like they're literally out there forcing their religion, maybe not violently anymore, but they're still forcing their religion on other people. So like you're just totally ignoring the vast history of Christianity in order to focus on these good parts because you like the good parts. The good parts make you feel good about believing in your God. Now, I know that Graham was wanting to ask about or contend the first point, but again, we're still not getting an answer to my original question. What particular tenet of Christianity overshadows and overrides all of the bad things that God has endorsed and commanded? What makes those things okay? Is there an argument that you can make that would make God endorsing chattel slavery okay? Is there anything in the Bible that would make it okay for God to basically set up a system of rape in the Bible where that's how you marry somebody and that's how you treat women constantly? Like, is there anything that makes those things okay?
Well, the Bible was written by many different people. I mean, it's not fair to the authors that wrote good stuff. I mean,
and which authors were those?
I'm not sure what that has to do with anything, quite frankly. We're talking about an organization of belief that basically the one common thread across all of Christianity is that there's a collection of these books, and they can't even agree between Protestant and Catholic on which books, but there's a core set of books that we all agree these are true. This is where we get our truth from. And that truth contains misogyny, racism, slavery, abuse of children, right? Bad medical advice, bad financial advice, bad life planning advice, right? Bad how to make your society safe advice. It's just filled with bad science, wrong science, unhealthy science, all sorts of stuff that's bad. And your counter argument to that is, well, it's written by different people and some of them wrote some good stuff. Great, but I don't need any of that. None of that makes up for what John is talking about. John is saying, hey, look at all this stuff that it endorses, that if you truly believe it, this is what you should do. And you're not giving us anything that says, but because of we did this and we showed that prayer works, for example. We could say, but if you believe in it and prayer works, it's saving millions of lives every year. We just pray for people and their cancer's gone, right? None of that stuff actually works. The stuff that would actually be good. When we test any of that, none of that works. So it's just, you get to tell women to stay in their place, stay at home and be baby factories, right? Because that's how Christians today treat women. We no longer have a Roe v. Wade case because that got overturned because of the Christian nationalist movement. Not too long ago, I grew up watching the Christians use the Bible to argue as to why people who are gay shouldn't get married. So don't give me that today Christians don't believe all the bad stuff. It is affecting people's lives today in a very negative way, to the point of people committing suicide, to the point of people killing people, not just Christianity, but all of the Abrahamic religions and beyond. So I don't think we're going to get very far. Do you have anything else to add to John? I'm going to let you go, John. I'm sorry, Stephen. John, do you have anything to add to that before we move on?
Well, the only thing that I would add is that we're not talking about the personal opinions of these authors or anything like that. What we're talking about is how the Bible represents God and what God wants and what God has commanded and all of that. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about like the personal opinions of ignorant, goat herders or whatever. We're talking about how this Bible is supposed to represent a deity and what that deity wants for our lives. And so that's just the only context that I would add onto that.
100%. I think his argument boils down to, y'all are taking this way too seriously. Just think of the good part and just ignore the other stuff, when the whole point is that for eons, people have taken it seriously and they take it seriously today. If nobody took it seriously, I wouldn't care. It's the reason I'm not an anti-Loch Monsterist. There's nobody out there saying that there's a Loch Ness Monster. And because there's a Loch Ness Monster, I want to control your government and control your life and your reproductive rights. And I want you to pay taxes to my Loch Ness Monster church, right? That's why I'm not a Loch Monsterist. But there are people doing those things in the name of Allah and Yahweh and all these other gods, which is why I am an atheist. And I need to identify myself because of those efforts. That's the harm that this is doing. It's not cherry picking to say, hey, there's a collection of beliefs and a good chunk of them result in convincing people to do really bad things. That's not cherry picking. That's pointing out a problem and proposing we fix the problem. So let's do that instead of saying that we're cherry picking. So that was a pretty good first call. I encourage you to call back once you get those ideas sort of straightened out. You obviously don't have them fully formed, but thanks for calling. We do have some super chats to read. If you can always give us a super chat to support the ACA and also to get your super chats read on air. So we're going to read a few here now. Laren Misha Sadai, a new member, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, for $5 said, "Godless and Cross. Sounds like a cool Buddy Atheist movie title. Godless and Cross, or Cross and Godless. Either way, it works. Would we be cops in that movie? A buddy cop movie, maybe? I don't know. Godless and Cross. Or maybe just a coming of age story. I'm godless, I'm cross, and it's a road movie. There we go.
It sounds
Jimmy
like a
Jr.
detective movie.
Yeah, exactly. Jimmy Jr. for $1.99. Super happy you're still with us, Cross Examiner. Thank you very much. I think he means that I didn't get fired yet. So that's good. Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Miranda Rensberger, a great contributor, gave us $10 and said, I'm afraid of religious zealots trying to take rights away from people I love. I'm not afraid of religion itself. I couldn't have put it any better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John, I think I follow up with your take on that. It's not the religion itself. It's the believer's actions that I fear.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm going to take another call here. We've got it is Sarah is the name. So Sarah is in Texas. Sarah's note is, I think Christians get it wrong about Yahweh and Jesus being the same. So I wanted to open that up. That sounds like an interesting conversation, Sarah. What are your thoughts there?
Well, so I believe in Gnosticism. And actually, I looked it up just now. It says, no, Jesus is not the same as Yahweh. So a lot of Christians in the church, they kind of have, how do I say it? Sorry, I get nervous. But anyway, they have like, I believe that the Catholic Church corrupted the Bible. And I believe that, I mean, I don't know for sure because it says it doesn't, but, you know, they can hide information. I don't know what they can do. But I want to say that I feel like there's a lot of things that I guess I have read about today, especially. And basically what I learned is, you know, when they're talking to Pharisees and they're talking about, you know, your father is not my father, and art thou in heaven? They're talking to the Pharisees and they're saying these things. What they're referring to is your father of, you know, the devil, which is Yahweh. They're saying your father, not my father in heaven. So they're not talking about his father in heaven is not talking about Yahweh. I don't know if like people know about that, but it's something that I have really studied because honestly, I mean, I haven't studied it entirely, but honestly, I feel like, I just feel like Christians, what you were telling that other guy, honestly, I feel like, you know, they get it wrong about the whole gay thing and all that stuff because that's Yahweh. That is Yahweh saying those things. That is Yahweh saying, oh, we should stone gays and we should just, you know, blame raped women for the crimes of man. That is Yahweh saying those things. And Jesus was trying to rebel against it. And he was trying to say, well, he was trying to rebel actively against Yahweh's teachings. Because
okay,
Yahweh,
well, I want to jump in here because I've got a couple of responses, and I'm very eager to hear what John has to say. He's sort of a historical expert when it comes to the origins of the religion. So I want to jump over there. But first of all, I want to compliment you for your studies. I will give you a small correction. It's not Gnosticism. It's just Gnosticism. The G is silent. But as somebody famous once said, never sort of mock anybody who mispronounces a word because it means they learned the word from reading. So I know you've been reading and researching, so I compliment you on that. So Gnostic thought has been around, if I recall correctly, John, by the 2nd century, maybe they started talking about it, and it has to do with sort of a separation between the divine and the world, and that they tend to consider the world sort of evil or something like that. But maybe you can help me understand because I'm not intimately familiar with it. Are you?
Well, yeah. So Gnostics or Gnosticism is kind of a bad label to use. At least has scholars like New Testament scholars are starting to come around to now, just because it seems to just be a different sect of Christians that have just different beliefs. And so there's a whole thing in the scholarly community about Gnostics and Gnosticism. But as far as Gnostics go, they feel like they have this special knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And so
as the name implies.
Right.
Gnosticism, knowing. Yeah.
Right. And for Gnostics, a lot of Gnostics out there, as far as I remember, they probably are not part of like the Catholicism's 12 or not 12, sorry, triune God sort of thing. That is a later development. So I will agree that that's a later development. But the thing about Gnosticism and Gnostics is that you have to understand that they definitely had this view that Jesus was not God. Like there was definitely a defining line between the two, but you also have a lot of ambiguous like terms, like in the Bible, like in the Gospel of John. Jesus is very blatant about saying that he is the great I am. Like I am. I was trying to look up the Bible verse so that I could repeat it for you, but it's like I am the great I am, or something to that effect.
Right.
And so like God definitely aligns himself as like on the same level as Yahweh. A good person to read about this, if you're interested, caller, Sarah, is Bart Ehrman's How Jesus Became God, because that book, Bart Ehrman's a New Testament textual critic. He actually goes through like the development between Jesus and God as it progressed throughout early Christianity, and you'll see how Jesus was actually turned into like Yahweh or God, how they merged both of those concepts together. So I would definitely suggest looking into that book as far as like the history of how that developed.
That's excellent. Excellent. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
Can you tell me the name of the person again? Sorry, I put How Jesus Became. Is it a book?
It's a book by Dr. Bart Ehrman. Dr. Bart Ehrman, Ehrman, I believe is how you spell his last name. But he's got it's an excellent review of basically how Jesus became God. And so like in the official canon of Christianity and how people understand it now, he's God, like in that particular aspect. But in like the original text, or how the original Christians would have thought of Jesus, he wasn't Yahweh, but he was sort of like co-equal. He was on the same sort of level as God, and he was God's agent of creation, meaning that God used him to create things. So like he was a tool of God, basically.
And if I understand correctly, John, this is coming out of a tradition where Christianity, especially Judaism, were coming out of a tradition where they were saying, hey, there was a pantheon of gods. We're a little bit different. But that sort of still snuck into Gnosticism, because they sort of believed that there was this sort of hidden supreme being, and that the Yahweh character from the Bible was sort of a malevolent God, and that then Jesus was different from that. And like Sarah properly described, a rebel fighting against the Darth Vader to the invisible emperor, or something like that. And it speaks back to this. Even the Bible, if I recall correctly, mentions or alludes to other gods, that God talks about we or other gods when we're walking. He was the only one that came to the Garden of Eden, or something like that. So there is this sort of mixture in Gnosticism of, yeah, there's multiple gods. We got major deities, we got minor deities, we got humans. And it sounds very much to me like, Greek mythology, where you create all these different characters because it's interesting, right?
Yeah. And Judaism was what's classified as henotheistic, meaning that they worship one God, but they acknowledge that all these other gods existed. So like that was the whole idea, was that the Israelites worship Yahweh, and Yahweh went through multiple different iterations, and there's some connection to other Canaanite religions as well. But they acknowledged that all these other gods existed. I believe it was in maybe Ezekiel. It actually talks about Inanna and the queen of heaven. and Tammuz. And so like they totally acknowledge that these other gods like were out there, existed, and had their own worshipers. But it was henotheistic. That's why you find those kind of references.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Sarah, I have a question for you. First of all, I hope that helped. But the question I have is, if we hear all of this, right, we understand where you're coming from, saying, hey, you're either believe you're a Gnostic or you're leaning that way, and you're coming out of this Christian tradition. You seem to be accepting the historicity of Jesus and the existence of Yahweh as a malevolent person. My question is what evidence do you have that any of this is anything more than fan fiction? Right? That's my main question is, we can sit here and gaze at our belly buttons all day long trying to say, well, what if Harry Potter was bad? But what if none of this is real is my question. Like, I don't have any evidence that there is a Yahweh, that there is a hidden God that is above Yahweh. And I don't have much evidence, and John, I don't want to get John on a rant, but we don't have much evidence that Jesus even was really one real person. So why do you believe this? That's what I'm curious about. So I know what you believe. Now I want to know, why do you believe this?
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. No, I looked it up. Is Jesus real? Let me see if I can find what I was just looking at. I'm
okay. I don't want to hear. We don't have time for you to read stuff. And John certainly is well equipped to address questions and all that stuff. I want to understand why you believe. And you just said I looked it up. Do you believe it because you read it on something, or why do you accept this as true? What evidence do you have that there is a God? Okay, let's start there. Let's not talk about Jesus. What evidence do you have that any supernatural claim about a God is actually true?
Well, I mean, I don't know what evidence you're looking for, and it's not just
any evidence that you think you could present to anybody that should be convincing to them. Not totally convincing, but any evidence that makes it more likely to be true.
I think there's evidence for and against, and I don't know what's really true, and I'm trying to find out what's true. And I have personal spiritual experiences that really are beyond the norm. I mean,
sure.
I had, and I'm not talking about, I prayed for somebody and they got better. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the door locking on its own. My mom sees it, and I am schizoaffective, so I got a mental illness, but she saw it too. She was there and she saw it. She saw the door lock on its own. She said something about it.
So are we saying that because the door locked on its own and she saw it, therefore Yahweh exists and is a malevolent God? Is that the jump we're making, or is there more?
That's not all. No.
Okay.
That's not all. I also saw Jesus in the hospital, and I don't know what that means, but I'm just...
Okay. Well, there we go. That's interesting.
There's something.
Okay.
I saw...
John, I didn't mean to interrupt you. John had a question or a point to make out here.
Sure.
Well, yeah. So no, you're fine. I always find the supernatural like experiences or claims like that to be a little funny to me. I don't mean to be, derogatory towards your experience or anything, but like it's always funny to me whenever I hear somebody, talk about those kinds of experiences, because it's like you're telling me that there's like a ghost or some spiritual force out there that, has the option to break anything in reality, to do anything in reality. They choose to lock a door. That kind of seems a little trivial to me. But as far as the Jesus being seen in a hospital, considering that you acknowledge that you do have a mental illness in that particular respect, don't you think that it's more likely that your mind was just fabricating something as opposed to like Jesus really being there and you're the only one that can see him?
I've seen things outside of my schizophrenia, so how do we know the truth? How do we know?
That's a great question. And here's my question back for you on that. That is a really good question, right? I have watched many videos from people who are schizophrenic, and they get on YouTube and they try to describe it. And they've got a lot of quality content to try to sort of explain what it is like. So I feel like I can empathize a little bit. Obviously, I can't relate, so to speak. But
True.
I can ask you the following question. Should your personal experiences be convincing to anyone other than you?
I guess not, but
okay. So if they shouldn't be convincing to anyone other than you, then maybe you should give them less weight than you do, possibly. It's hard. That's why movies like The Matrix exist, right? Is at some point something becomes so overwhelmingly personally convincing that you have to accept it as reality. But I don't think that's where you are, if I'm understanding you correctly. I think you are experiencing things and then applying some assumptions and a filter to it to saying, well, I can't explain this, therefore God. Am I understanding you correctly?
No.
Okay. Where am I wrong?
Experience, and I'm labeling it as a spiritual experience, and there's no other label for that experience, so I'm just labeling it as a spiritual experience because I don't have another label for it. And there's not.
That's literally what I just said.
Figured out so many things. Yeah.
So I think that's literally what I just said. I had an experience. I can't explain it, so I'm going to say it was God, or you're saying spiritual, but it's that we're getting to the same point, right? I can't explain this, therefore something mystical happened. Is that fair?
I guess, but
okay. Well, I think John would agree that we classify that's a logical fallacy called an argument from ignorance. It doesn't mean you are ignorant. It just means that is the form of the argument. I can't explain X, therefore this other thing that is a story that explains it is the proper explanation. So that is literally the form of the argument. You saying no about it is not going to change the fact that that's the form of the argument you're making. I experience things, I can't explain it, therefore it's spiritual. That is an argument from ignorance. That is you can also call it a categorical argument, a miscategorical argument, I guess. John, am I missing any arguments here?
I'm confused because it's a spiritual experience. There's no other thing to describe it as. So why would?
No, okay. I see the premise you're sneaking in. Instead of saying there is no other way to explain it, you could instead say, I have no other way to explain it. You and I could have the same experience, and I might go, wow, I just had the craziest dream or delusion, right? Or like I said earlier, I went to the sphere and I had this amazing, what some people might call a spiritual experience. I interpreted it as my hormones got crazy. I was really excited. I was blown away by this audio visual experience and this nostalgia for a band I grew up listening to. And they were so amazing. Like I had that experience. I don't call it spiritual because I have different words to do that with. So just using the word spiritual is smuggling in a bunch of baggage. So instead of saying there is no way to explain it, you should say, I don't have a way to explain it. And I think then if you use that language, you will see that takes the form of an argument from ignorance. I don't have another way to explain this, so I am going to say it is spiritual.
But
does that make sense?
I mean, I don't know how. No, it doesn't. Because honestly, if my mom saw that too, I mean, what else am I supposed to believe?
You're supposed to believe that you should investigate. You're supposed to believe that I don't know what happened. That was weird. Can we experiment? Can we run a test? Can we try to create those conditions again? What's more likely that, as John pointed out, an all-knowing spiritual being that has amazing powers to violate the laws of physics locked my door, or something weird happened? We both heard a click and we misinterpreted it, or the wind blew, or who knows what. And I always have problems arguing against these just so stories or these anecdotes, because in the end, almost anything else is more likely. It is more likely that some trickster kids fooled you, that a prank show set you up, than a spiritual being chose to lock your door and make you witness it. And that was how they chose to prove to you that there was a God. Like, I don't know what else to respond to that other than I don't know is a valid answer. How about you, John?
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't.
Hold on. I'd like to hear from John real quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know is a perfectly fine answer, and I think that I personally tend to err on the side of like the most likely conclusion, and the most likely conclusion would be that it was just some kind of natural event that you don't understand. And so I think that if you try to look at it with the skeptical lens and you try to explain it naturally rather than making this false dichotomy of either supernatural or like
Fully
either
explained, yeah.
magical supernatural, or it has to be fully explained right then and there. Like I think that if you're going to make that your dichotomy, you're gonna find yourself believing in a whole lot of magic.
What are your thoughts, Sarah?
But I'm not just believing, oh, I prayed and somebody got better. That's not what I'm experiencing.
No,
No, you're actually believing something worse. You're actually believing this door clicked and locked, therefore God, rather than let me put this one claim in the Bible to test. I'm going to pray and see if this person it gets better. They do. That is one piece of evidence. That would actually be a piece of evidence. It's not great evidence because when we reproduce that on scale, we find it's no better than chance. And in some cases, it's worse than chance that people get worse, but it would be evidence. Here, you're actually doing something worse. You're saying, oh, wow, something happened. I wasn't filming it. Well, I wasn't really looking at it, but it happened. I experienced it. She experienced it. Therefore, and we don't know how it happened. And maybe we don't even know exactly what happened, but therefore it's a supernatural event. And that's the worst place to be, is to say, I must know the answer. I think John's description of it is a false dichotomy. It's either fully explained or it's supernatural. It's not somewhere in the middle where I can say, I don't know. I think you should get more comfortable with saying, I don't know.
I do.
Your thoughts, Sarah?
People saying I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things I'm not even sure about my beliefs. I'm just saying.
Okay, so what caused the door to lock?
I don't know.
Hey, perfect. Great answer. Any other questions for us?
Well, let me see what I've got here. What about NEDs? I wonder, about the hell thing and people.
NDE, near-death experience?
Yeah, like I've heard that other people have seen Jesus, like people from other religions, and I'm just trying to understand.
Right. I understand that you're trying to understand why they would. And I mean, right now, like religion is a very popular topic in like just modern culture in general. So like, just because they aren't of the Christian persuasion doesn't mean that they haven't had any kind of, Christian influence in their life. They've been exposed to like visuals of Jesus and all that other kind of stuff. To speak on the whole NDE thing real quick, we can't actually distinguish when these visions or these experiences are taking place, like whether it's on the right before brain death or right after the brain is revived or anything like that. But what we can be sure of is that we will never be able to know whether or not it's actually like occurring during brain death. And by definition, these experiences don't happen during brain death. So, I mean, the most likely conclusion here is that these experiences are being had by a brain that's kind of going into a death rattle, I guess. And they're having these experiences as a way for the person's brain to like deal with the experience of death. And so they're having these experiences on either side of like either dying or coming back from the dead. And so with that in mind, there's been a number of experiments that have been done where people write something on a plaque or something like that and put it like up above the person when they supposedly die, and nobody has been able to read it and all this other stuff. So like these NDEs that supposedly happen, even if it's a person of one religion that then sees Jesus or whatever, there are perfectly reasonable and rational explanations that can point you towards some really natural reason as to why they would have these sort of experiences before and after death.
Yeah. I think, Sarah, if I were to describe you, you sound like, I don't know if you ever watched The X-Files. It's an old show. There was a character on it, Mulder, and his catchphrase was basically, I want to believe. And I'm getting that vibe here. What about this? What about this? What about that? You're sort of desperately seeking affirmation that there is some sort of religious thing, and it's all coming from these disparate sources that are all questionable. I would ask you the same question. What about all of the examples of people who have claimed to have NDEs or gone to heaven and come back? The famous book that was written by the child who died and went to heaven and spoke to Jesus and came back, and only later was it revealed to be a fraud that the parents made up, right? People do this all the time. We have lots of evidence of people making up those stories. But even if we don't, we have also lots of evidence of what John alluded to earlier, which is sort of societal collective consciousness. Depictions of aliens were very diverse prior to 1950s and 60s Hollywood until the little green men came along. And then once, especially Close Encounters of the Third Kind came along, all of a sudden people who claimed to have alien abductions, their descriptions of those aliens started to converge and look a lot like what they saw in the movies. This all points to people sort of having experiences and drawing from their conscious or their subconscious. Yes, when you die, you start losing oxygen to the brain, and we know from studies that when you start depriving a brain of oxygen, it starts having delusions. So I would not put much faith in that until somebody comes back and says, I had an NDE, and here's 28 very particular things that are going to happen, very, very specific things. And all of a sudden, okay, maybe there's something to investigate. I'm still on the I don't know. But so far, people who have NDEs have just told us happy feeling, white tunnel, Jesus, stuff that you would dream about. So I would leave it there. I'm gonna let you go, Sarah. Thank you, John. We've got a lot of calls. I really appreciate you call. You're a very nice caller. I encourage your research to continue. I would always encourage you to say, what evidence do I have, and would it convince anybody other than me, to sort of help guide like how much weight you should put on anything? Because the worst case is you start believing something because of these light sort of wanting to believe, and then you get mixed up in something where it's like, oh, because I believe this I need to do these things that are either bad for me or bad for other people, and you don't want to fall prey to that. What are your thoughts about Sarah's call, John?
I mean, I thought it was a really good call, and I really appreciated Sarah, calling in to discuss these things, because I know that when people have these kind of, supernatural seeming experiences, it can be very powerful for them and very convincing. Convincing them of like the supernatural, convincing them of like God or whatever. I still like. It would be difficult for me to take something seriously like a door locking or something like that. And especially the seeing the Jesus in the hospital, my alarm bells go off whenever somebody says that, because I'm like, I'm sure that Jesus was like, white, had brown hair, blue eyes.
Well, we don't know. To be fair, we don't know.
Well,
but
right, yeah.
The idea is 100%. I agree with you. I've never found those arguments to be very convincing, because everybody's got one. They're all different, and they're all very inconsequential. It's always, I saw something, and it's a lot of times it's right after or before you were unconscious or asleep, or you were on I've got a quick story I tell. I think everybody should go through this. So back when I was recovering from cancer surgery, I had like a 15-hour surgery, liver, rectum, all sorts of stuff, lungs. I was in the ICU. I woke up, and one of the nurses was the meanest person I'd ever met. She was just really mean to me, didn't like me, was staring at me with dagger eyes when my wife was talking to me. And she had told me that she was going to try to steal my possessions when I wasn't looking. And when I told this to a friend of mine, she is a physician, she looked at my chart. She went and spoke to my attending physician, my surgeon, and they came over and said, yeah, we had to switch you to a different painkiller because your heart rate wasn't coming down before you woke up. We're going to take you off that painkiller because we're pretty sure you're having hallucinations. And they switched me onto a new painkiller. And within, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour, I was like, oh, this nurse is the nicest person in the world. And I would have sworn under oath, the penalty of death, that this woman wanted to kill me, steal my stuff, and hated me. And it was all because of a few milligrams of a substance that was in my blood. And I had that experience, like, changed my life forever. And like, oh, this is what mental illness can be like. Like, I was convinced. So I get it to some degree. But on the other hand, I sought other people's input. I'm not Neo caught in the matrix. I can turn to somebody and say, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? And they go, oh, whoa, no, we're not. All right. So something's a problem. So yeah, I've never found those stories convincing because none of them actually produces anything that's surprisingly, 2 or more standard deviations out from the norm. Like, nobody's predicting a day-to-day ticks of the stock market for 20 years or, anything like that. So I do have a few of announcements that we always like to encourage people to participate more in our community. And we've been doing a lot of that lately for ACA. So right now, available on the website, atheist-community.org, there are printable call-in flyers. These flyers are things you can post in public places. When you do post in an area where you don't own that thing, please do ask for permission to post there. And you can put them on community bulletin boards, things like that, so people know they can call our show to defend their belief. Like, we are still, I don't want to speak to John, but I'm still very open to evidence and argument, and evidence mostly, of a God, because it is the most important proposition anybody's put out there, that, hey, something else happens after you die. And if it's that important, I'd love to hear the evidence that that's true. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, send a super chat with a question or a comment. We'll read as many as we can. The ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, you can head to our website again, atheist-community.org, where you can learn more about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. And if you like what we do, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Patreon ensures any donations, any memberships you give us through Patreon ensures our ability to continue to produce the content that you love. And to do that, you can visit tiny.cc/PatreonAXP. And finally, we do want to send a big thank you to the crew. They put this show on every single week. There they are, some of them, some of the guilty party. They are video operators, audio operators, note takers, call screeners, and chat moderators, and occasional cats. I don't know if we have any cats in the shot, who make this show a reality. John and I show up and we just blather on. They're doing the real work to make sure that this show goes out on time, in a intelligible way, so that as many people can sort of hear these discussions and hopefully be swayed to be a little more skeptical about fanciful claims. So thank you very much, cast and crew. Shall we take another call, John?
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Okay. I have a few in the list. I would like to talk to Carl in Wales, if he is still with us. This is Carl said, God is a universal truth, and I am the next Jesus. And there is a note here, Carl, so I want to be sensitive about this. The note from our Carl screener said that you wanted us to know that you are on the spectrum, like my son is autistic on the spectrum, and also has ADHD, like my son, and maybe dyslexic as well. So you have these sort of, you're not neurotypical, so to speak. So A, is that true? And B, I want to make sure that the claim I read is correct, that you believe that God is a universal truth and that you are the next Jesus. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to just slightly alter you. It is correct, but it was a
Okay.
slight missing. And what it does is it actually says you were actually true in introducing the little warning and the side note put in, because the first part of the claim, it says, I have a delusion that says God is universal truth.
Oh, okay.
Well, not Christ, actually, next Jesus. I just got a link onto Christ somehow because of like the sort of, I grew up in, I suppose, both an atheist and a Christian background. So
Okay.
I was very partial to both sort of understandings as an outsider, as you described me a little earlier, which was cool. I like that. So
Okay.
I would like to just bring you back to the fact that I said this as I would normally do it for a specific reason. And what it is, I'd like to just start with the first part of my claim, which then helps you guys see my world a little bit. And I also put a few disclaimers so you understand that we've taken precautions to understand that even though I do have a tendency, because we are dealing with delusions, to maybe get a little erratic, at any point my wife and care team here feels that's happening. They're watching the show with AirPods in, by the way, so they'll be happy,
Okay.
but they can still see me and hear me as well.
Welcome.
We will do the grown-up things, suggesting to you guys that I'm actually not coping, guys. This has been a great experience. Can I recover and come back next week? Does that sound like an amazing deal we can make if I do struggle?
Oh, absolutely. 100. We always encourage repeat callers, especially if they're as polite and straightforward as you.
Okay, well, with that, then it removes a little, what I often, the little delusions I have, I can see the little delusional. We would often call them phobias, yes? So little phobia is that if there's a problem, I might have an issue in communicating. So the part that says it's a delusion, let me explain this little part separately, because that obviously covers a lot of things that we need to understand from the beginning, and that is that I am described by medical professionals as having ADHD, as we said. My relationship with that, as you may see, that might be a difficulty, but it's not a difficulty because, again, I have something for it, is I lose track of time. And I can also lose track of where I am in a story to try and describe it in another manner because I'm doing both things at the same time in my head. At any point that's happening, of course, just ask me to say, hey, Carl, can I ask you to take a breath? And at that moment,
Understood.
Take a breath, I'll stop everything, and then I'll listen to you guys, because I'm not here. I want to make the most today is about making a friendly environment and hopefully moving past that friendly environment and trying to explain why I've called in today and why I've been practicing this for almost the last year.
That sounds great. I think, just so you know, I think you're doing an excellent job. And so why don't you go on to explain to us what the story that you want to start with. And if I feel like it's running on, I will jump in and we are a call-in show that needs to sort of get to the point at some point. So why don't you hit your first point and we'll see how that goes.
Yes, I'll do it. Okay, and so the delusional part for everybody to understand is with all the things I've been diagnosed with, they say this has led, because I didn't get it sorted when I was young, and as a child, I experienced a lot of abuse in many areas, except for sexual, as far as I'm concerned. Sorry if that was a bit too broad. I didn't think then. So, but like,
it's okay.
That's the truth. We don't need to speak about this. It gives you an understanding of me. That's all. And the things I've dealt with, and I'm actually brilliant with now. But like, just so you understand. And from that, I form delusions of grandeur. And what this means to me is, a delusion is just a fractured. And something that's true to me is true to me. But something that's like, I'll give you an understanding. I'm not attacking you, but I'd say atheism is an illusion that appears to be true. But because you guys don't claim that there's no God because there's evidence of no God, I believe that's, it's just lack of evidence there's no God, which then turns God into more of an ambiguous term, which then causes all the friction. I get that, but that still is an illusion because nobody can actually say for sure there is no God. So that's why I call it a truthful illusion that I've lived by for many years. But a delusion to me is another truth that actually says, wait a minute, this also could be true. Do you want to weigh this up? So I get a lot of these. And so I've found ways, and I want to say thank you to your show because it's been one of those ways. It's not more you new guys. I don't know you as well. Sorry about that. But I know people like Matt Dillahunty and Tracy Harris, Jen Peoples, I watched back then, and they helped me with a lot of the delusion I was suffering from at the younger age because they were very biblical. I think a lot of people were starting to get biblical ideas in my head, and but I mean theistical ideas, things built on faith and things, and my delusions were building them. So you guys,
well, why don't we jump to? Can you describe? You pick one delusion. You mentioned delusions of grandeur. Does this feel very real to you on a regular basis?
It feels realer than anything so far anybody's ever told me that God is real. There's a universal truth. But like,
understood.
What I found is to explain it to people in many different ways. I have a really, really difficult time because it leads to things that don't make sense in my head, and then I spiral out of control. I found a linear path to this which says, if I can just first form with you, get rid of sort of like little fears, I'll be able to say it correctly. Otherwise, I will spiral out of control. And that's why I said, like, if I go too long on for you guys, you can just say we can call back next week, and this will be a good.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I will say, to try to put you at ease, I mentioned this earlier. I have a son who is autistic. Okay. He's on the autism spectrum. He also is diagnosed with ADHD. He also has some developmental delay. So I am very familiar with some of what you have gone through. Okay. So I can empathize a little bit there. And I do want to encourage you to take your time. But I agree with your strategy that maybe we do it one chunk at a time. And today I want to get to just the first little bit of it so you're comfortable. And I think you've already done a great job being vulnerable and telling us, hey, I think I've been told I have delusions, or I'm experiencing these delusions, and one of them makes me convinced that God is absolutely real. We should probably talk about that for a few minutes and then let you take a break and maybe call back next week. Yes. So let's talk about that one, when you feel that God is real. Does that result in I have many questions. So first, I think the most important question for me is, how does that translate into an urge in your mind to take any particular actions? Like, is God telling you to do something, or is there a particular type of God, or is it just, I believe that there is a God, I feel that there's a God, but I don't feel compelled to do anything because of that? What are your thoughts there?
I can answer that, but I can't answer in the way that you asked me to answer it. It's very difficult for me because it doesn't line up with how I see reality. But I understand what you're asking me. So if you let me have a crack at this, I'll speed ahead in the next step then, so I can get to something just before getting to my claims, so we can speed this up. Okay. So to answer all that and to help me actually move on to, talking about why it's real to me, is I don't claim that I feel it's real. I claim it is real as a universal truth, as what you would describe as a Gnostic would claim it. So in one respect, I would say I was a Gnostic, but I claim myself to be a disciple. And what I mean by this word is, inside me, because this is very new, there's a part of me that I love that's helped me all along defeat these delusions called scrutiny and skepticism. And you guys have helped me with that. But at the moment, everything you guys have helped me with, and anybody's ever helped me with, have failed to this new delusion. So this falls at 1%, and this 1% is trapped in a logical paradox I can't get out.
Yeah.
And so the only way out really is to accept God is real where I am at. And I've gone there at a 99% capacity of saying that's 100% assurity. But because I want to leave room to find out that, look, I have delusions. So I've got to leave room for someone like you guys to maybe come in and help me find a pathway back to say, hey, Carl,
sure,
looking at this maybe a little bit differently to us. This is what we do. So what I would say is Gnosticism to me, this is how I form it in my mind, is to say that is the only true version to understand the one true God. You can't do it as a theist, because if you can't point to the one true God, I don't believe you could call yourself a Gnostic, because you don't know. You may claim to know, but that's the way I perceive it in my mind. So there's only Gnosticism, but then the invert of Gnosticism then is when you find you don't know, because you've reverted back to maybe a survival sort of instinct in us, which looks at things more subjectively to help us to survive, because I think humans' greatest survival tool is more our subjective nature and our way we can lie and keep secrets and deceive each other. It's more of a survival technique I've learned that we've used. I've noticed it in children, my children, me as a child, and I thought, yeah, that's kind of true to me. So I'm not I'm just saying that's why it's formed.
I do want to jump in right now and say, I think this is a good place for us to sort of respond and take a break and maybe have you call back next week, because we've gotten the first part out and I hope you're comfortable. I do want to ask my co-host, John, do you have any sort of...
I'm having difficulty because I haven't finished what I'm saying, so it's causing difficulty to me because you can only discuss half of the whole thing. But I can.
Yeah, the problem that I have, Carl, if I find honesty is the best policy, right? We've been on for 10 minutes and on to 11 minutes. It is a call-in show, so I think it's best when people have lengthy explanations or detailed or feel compelled to have detailed conversations that we do it. I think your idea was great. Let we do the tip of the iceberg. We address that and talk about it a little bit, maybe with you offline, so you can listen to our thoughts and note what we get wrong as far as trying to understand where you're coming from. And then you can call back again next week, or when I'm on as a host again, or when John's on as a host, and we can continue the conversation. So I'm gonna pause you, put you on mute for a second, and hear from John. John, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't really have too much of a thought, just because like I'm not exactly sure where we're going in the conversation. But I mean, as far as like, I guess recognizing this delusion of a God, which maybe I'm misunderstanding what the caller was trying to say, but like recognizing it as like, oh, I'm deluded into thinking that there is a God or something like that, and then coming back from that, I think that. For me, what kind of helps is just recentering myself to realize that the natural world has natural phenomena that is explained naturally. And so like in order to posit a God or to make a God more credible, or at least the most likely conclusion, you would need a whole lot more evidence in order to suggest that God is responsible for it. And so like just recognizing the role that nature plays in our reality, I think could be a good start. But
yeah,
maybe I don't understand where the caller's going with his discussion here.
No, I think I agree with you. I think Carl gave a very good baseline to say, hey, here's where I'm coming from. And I understand his reticence to really jump in with both feet, and he wanted to level set with us as far as expectations about his ability to even communicate these concepts. And I really applaud him for calling in. I do think that hearing us talk about it after the fact maybe will give him some points to think about and come back with next week. My main takeaway, I found it very interesting, Carl, when you said, I'm 99% there, but I'm holding this 1% back so that I can, and I'm going to call that 1% your skepticism. I think that's how I perceived what you were describing that 1% as, hey, I'm convinced 99% of the way that this is a truth for me, but maybe, I'm holding this 1% back to say, maybe there's ways that I can be unconvinced. And I don't have a lot of experience, personally or professionally, with delusion. It mostly comes from, I do have a friend who is a psychiatrist, and I talk to her sometimes about it, but it is unique to every person. Is the one thing I've learned, is you can never just make assumptions. So I really don't know what you are going through. I do encourage you to listen to what we've said in this show and previous shows. The hosts you mentioned from a long time ago are the same ones I listen to as well. They are excellent. We also tend to try to help as well. So to you and all the people who were listening with you, I really do applaud you calling in. I would encourage you to keep that 1% open, because if you become convinced of something that's wrong, right, then you can get into trouble, so to speak. You can cause a problem for yourself or for people around you. So that's one way to sort of always be checking to say, what evidence do I have this is true? Is it just a feeling? Or do I have actual evidence? And not just evidence of what I think, but evidence of what I remember and evidence of what other people witness. And if all of that doesn't add up to support my feeling of I'm a supreme being or there is a God, I can remain skeptical, and I can at least sit at I don't know. And I don't know is a perfectly great place to be, because I don't know prevents you from making drastic mistakes. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I got this investment and I'm gonna need 10 grand from you, but you're gonna make $1 million in 6 months, and you sit at I don't know, you're not gonna give them your 10 grand and lose the money, right? And so that's what I would encourage you to do there is to think about that. And I do want to thank you, Carl, for being here with us. Is it something that you can do where you can call back again at a later date and sort of continue the conversation?
Definitely. What I'll do is I'll join again next week. I'll give you a week to prepare. I have another interview set up. I just wanted to, I heard you guys, and I think it's very fair for things you're saying. It's difficult because obviously I didn't get to where I wanted to get, as the other host pointed out, and I understood that. But if I just get to one little thing before we go, and just say, then I don't leave you with food for thought to say, okay, so with knowing there's a gap in between that needs to be explained. If I said to you, God to me, as a word is defined by a definition that says that which has authority over all things.
Okay. That's fair enough. I think you can take that definition and say, if such a thing exists, how do I know it exists? And from whence does that authority derive? And those are two very good questions to go and look at. So thank you.
Absolutely great question. And it can be answered by saying the objective reality proves it exists. The relationship you have with it, which is truth, proves it exists, because they all follow that definition. And then obviously what we use, which is the logos, to prove that it exists. And for you then to use that very same thing as an authority to deny it would then put you in a paradox to state that you have to claim that this is not authority. And because you have no other word to describe that which has authority over all things, and that description alone in itself is a paradox. It says it's the only true definition of God.
I understand. I am going to move on to another caller now, so I appreciate your time with us here. I will say regarding the last comment that Carl had, is starting to sound a lot like presuppositionalism. You can't explain logic, therefore I win. It sounded a lot like arguments from definitions, which, Carl, I would encourage you never to say because you don't have a definition or because it doesn't match a definition, therefore this argument makes sense. I don't care about definitions. I don't think anybody that's as serious at having these discussions does. You define X as anything, and that's what X will be for the purpose of our conversation. So I would focus on the evidence, and I would focus on keeping that skepticism open, because it's better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to be taken in by anyone, including your own brain, to be tricked into thinking that something's true when it's not. Any closing thoughts on that call, John?
No, I thought you handled that pretty well. I mean, I'm a little lost in the call in general, but maybe I can go back and revisit it and see what he might be talking about there.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I was a little lost as well. I think that if I had to sum up the call for Carl, you told us a bunch of facts about your belief. And I think what we're interested in talking about is why you believe them. And if you describe them as a delusion, then that word informs us that you believe something that you suspect or is not true. And that is interesting, but it also is, it sort of, the problem resolves itself as far as understanding what you believe and why. What to do about it, I don't think either John or I are qualified to talk about, but I know that you've already told us you have caregivers around you, people that care about you. Lean on them. Always ask other people for confirmation of your own perception is one way to protect yourself against delusions. I'm going to move on to Gemini, him from New York. The only note I have, Gemini, is it just says young Earth creation. So why don't you introduce yourself, Gemini, and what is it that you'd like to talk about?
I'm there.
Hello? I heard something. Gemini, are you with us? We can hear you. You're on the air. What would you like to talk about today? Genesis from the Bible?
Or isn't that like a band?
Yeah, like there is a band called Genesis. So are we talking about the creation story from the Bible? Or from the Pentateuch?
Yes.
Okay. What about Genesis?
Genesis 1.
What about Genesis 1? Why? What about Genesis would you like to talk about?
Creation account.
Okay, I need a little bit more from you. Could you please give us? Here's my question. I'll give you a chance to sort of explain yourself. What do you believe about creation? But more importantly, why do you believe it? So, what do you believe, and why do you believe it?
Genesis is true because the Bible is true. And Jesus said Genesis is true.
Okay, and you believe that. Why do you believe the Bible is quote unquote true? How can a book be true? I can understand how one claim inside a book could be true, but I don't understand how an entire book could be true. What does that mean?
Jesus spoke with authority.
I don't understand what that has to do with what I asked. I'm a little
sorry.
lost here, John.
Yeah, sorry. This is going. No, hold on. This is going really nowhere there, Gemini. You can't speak in just like short little catchphrases and everything like that. Also, I kind of feel like you might be using a text to speech program or something like that. I can hear typing before you speak in the background of your call. So, I mean, I don't know. Is there any way that you could just like talk to us?
Talk to us. We just had a guy, a brave soul, right, who admitted to a international audience that he suffers, he's on the spectrum, he's got ADHD, and he suffers from delusions. And he had a genuine conversation with us to the best of his ability. So please, one more chance. What is it that you think any of our audience would care to know from you about what you believe and why?
Just pray. Just pray. You'll find out.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. That is the most boring call I've ever had in I don't know how long. I mean, I don't know what that person was trying to accomplish.
No, come on, cross-examiner. You just got to pray and everything will be revealed. You know, just like it's like Jesus is out there wearing like one of those brown trench coats, and you pray and he'll flash you and be like, see creation. And then, you know, he pops back in. I mean, that's the best thing that I can. And you know what? He does that while listening to a Genesis song. I'm just saying.
That's my point. I was waiting for the big drum thing. Anytime I hear just pray and you will find out, I'm like, okay, that's step one. Step two is the no true Scotsman fallacy, because you're going to immediately say, okay, here's millions of people who used to pray all the time, genuine believers who now do not believe. And the only response to that is, well, they never really prayed and they never really tried. They never really believed. And that's all bullshit. That's the problem with religion, is it's this self-contained prison of the mind that puts you into a box where you can't be wrong. And any information you get that contradicts your worldview, you either have to alter your worldview so it's still in line with the big book, or you have to alter reality to fit a rule set where the new information doesn't violate your belief system. And that's what this just pray is shorthand for, because the immediate answer is always going to be, I prayed, I got nothing. Oh, well, it doesn't work like that. You didn't pray hard enough, etc. It's just like people who said, you pray and it didn't work. Well, I prayed for so-and-so to get healed. Oh, well, it's the God can't be that obvious, or it doesn't work that way. I'm sure there's a million amputees out there who have prayed for their limbs to grow back. And now we have not one documented case of that ever happening. So for your argument to be true, you have to tell me that no amputee was a genuine Christian who didn't sincerely ask God to regrow a limb. So give me a frickin' break. And when you call a show and waste people's time, you should feel bad about yourself, quite honestly. It really upsets me when people do this. And if you were right, John, I didn't pick up on that initially. If he's using a voice changer or whatever, I'm just going to call you a coward. Like I said, we just had a man expose the most vulnerable part of himself in an attempt to communicate with his fellow man about his belief systems. And you follow up with a voice changed, just pray. I don't know what you were trying to do, but that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you get this a lot, John, on your other shows? Like I don't get this too much.
Well, no, I not calls like that necessarily, but like just people not I guess not wanting to be very clear about what they're trying to argue for. That I've had plenty of experience with that, but I feel like that guy. I was really hoping that he had some kind of like more meaningful argument to present, because I mean, just in the few words that he gave, I mean, we could identify, circular reasoning as one fallacious thing. The Bible is true because the Bible says it's true, right, kind of thing. And so, it's just rather weird how easily people can be convinced of these positions. They can be convinced of these bad positions, and it's really amazing to me.
Yeah. I think if your entire statement to a show where people are genuinely trying to have these discussions is Genesis 1 because the Bible is true, and that's it, pray and you'll find out, dude, either you're a troll or you really have no idea what you're talking about. You literally haven't done the weetsiest bit of research into this to understand that these arguments have been discussed for aeons and they just don't work. So come back with something if you want to grow up and be an adult and have an actual conversation and put your views to the test. And anybody else out there who's listening, okay, this is something that we get from time to time in comments, like, why aren't there any real Christians calling in? Why do you only let the people who are idiots get through? This is the best you've got. This is what we get. I take the calls. I'm not out there knocking on doors. This is not a call out show. It's a call in show. If you can do better than this, and you think that religion is a good thing, that you have evidence for a supernatural claim related to religion, call us. We're very interested. It would be groundbreaking. We could collectively win Nobel Prizes and create chairs of new departments in universities for religious studies. So call us. We are deadly serious about this. My certain approach as an attorney is always, where does the rubber hit the road? People get beliefs, and when they start to believe that they know the will of a supreme being, they start feeling like they are called to do something, and that something can often infringe upon my rights, infringe upon other people's rights, or kill people. That's my main concern. And I know, John, you've had similar passionate experience about that, but my goodness, what a waste of time. All right. I'm upset about that. I'm sorry. I don't go on rants often, but man, that just is, boy. We have another call on the line I want to jump to. I know we're running a little late on time. We have Josh, who is him from Florida. Josh, your note says that you'd like to talk about the correlation between religious beliefs and their jobs. So people's jobs, I assume people's religious beliefs and their jobs. For instance, a lot of engineers are atheists, but doctors are more likely to be theistic. I'm actually going to call into question your first premise that a lot of engineers are atheists. I don't know what you mean by a lot. So, for example, anytime you see these letters about intelligent design signed by 1,000 scientists, right? And you look at their background, the vast majority of the people who signed this thing that says, hey, there's evidence for intelligent design, they're all engineers. So actually the engineer mindset tends to prompt you to see design in places, which tends to prompt you to believe in intelligent design. So I have evidence that it's not a lot, or at least amongst the professions that would be called scientists in these letters that go around every once in a while, engineers are overwhelmingly the most vulnerable to being to believing things that way. But maybe I'm getting ahead of the curve. Josh, please do tell me what your argument is.
Yeah, so I'm agnostic. I'm actually lean mostly towards atheism, unless someone could present some sort of scientific, testable evidence to convince me otherwise. I'm always open to seeing that and believing it when it's presented. My thing that I've noticed is, like psychologists, if you look up the American Academy of Sciences, they did a study that 93% identified as atheists or agnostic. Also, a lot of biologists are like 61% in some studies came back as non-believers. But we rely so heavily on the medical industry to save our life. If you're in a car accident, it doesn't matter what you believe in, you're going to go to the hospital and somebody there that's a doctor is going to be responsible for saving your life. I look at religion and non-religion believers as sort of data analysts. You know, you're given data, which is all these different religions, and you're asked to analyze them. And everyone's pretty much a data analyst. Are you able to come up with a logical explanation with all this data, or do you get dumbfounded and you pick data that doesn't make sense to hold on to? And so why are we, relying our life and our health on a large majority of doctors when
questioned came back as being theist, which in my opinion would then become bad data analyst.
Gotcha. I think, John, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. My initial response, Josh, I understand what you're going, Josh. My initial response, I think, if I understand what you're pointing out is, hey, why do we go see doctors when some percentage of them are theistic, right? My first response is, I don't care because it has to do with an engineering job, fixing the body. If it were a psychiatrist, there are entire organizations who are like, hey, I think it's called the Secular Therapy Project or something like that actually push back against, going to see somebody who's a theist if you are not a theistic patient, where it matters, with processing your life, processing beliefs and understanding. So that's my first response. My second response is people who are religious tend to, and are professionals, tend to segregate religious claims off into one section of their brain. Francis Collins is a perfect example. He was the leader of the Human Genome Project, the first team to sequence the whole human genome, like amazing biologist, head of the NIH for years, right? Scientist. His quote is, if there were no other evidence for evolution other than the genetic record, evolution would be overwhelmingly proved true. So he is a scientist, yet he is also an evangelical Christian. He tells a story about, hey, I was out in the woods and I saw a river that was frozen into 3 parts and it reminded me of the Trinity of the God. And I dropped on my knees and I had this spiritual experience. And he became what he now describes as a Christian. But he is an eminent scientist who I would trust with telling me anything about genetics or evolution or anything along those lines. So I think that's my point, is you can be both. And you're not crazy if you're religious. You're just wrong about some things. What are your thoughts, John? Do you run into, we need to identify that I may have slandered John because he is the Godless Engineer, and I badmouthed engineers as possibly being more vulnerable to seeing design in places. So I apologize, John. But what are your thoughts?
No, it's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that as long as, your religious belief doesn't interfere with, your professional life, I think that there's no like conflict of interest there. Like, I don't see why it matters if, most doctors believe in God or whatever. I think that I'm from North Alabama. So like I'm regularly around a lot of people that are incredibly smart. They have multiple PhDs. They believe in God. I feel like people have, especially people that are indoctrinated early into a religious faith, are masterful at compartmentalizing. They can compartmentalize their religious belief and separate it from their more analytical, belief side, and they can definitely still operate like professionally without having to like introduce their own religious beliefs into it. And so I think that like let's say doctors are more religious. They probably experience a lot of things that they can't understand or they can't explain necessarily. And so the only thing that they can do is say, oh, well, God did it. I mean, honestly, that's not really a sound way to argue. But
no, you can make up other explanations too. Like I am lucky enough to be friends with a lot of professionals, a good number of whom are physicians. And I would categorize them as very empathetic, caring people. So you could say, hey, is there a correlation? But maybe the correlation is not between doctor and religion. Maybe it's between people who grew up just naturally being more empathetic in religion because they sense a connectedness, or who knows? But I think your point's perfectly valid, John. I didn't mean to interrupt there, but there's all sorts of causalities we may not understand. That it's a common cause. It's not a direct correlation. We are empathetic, so we are more religious, or we are empathetic, so we're more likely to be doctors.
Right. Yeah. Correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah. Good point. That's a good way to summarize it. So I don't know if that answers any sort of questions you had, Josh. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I gather all that. My whole thought process was, I guess, just like the whole running back to data analysis is like you have all the data, which is all the different religions, and you're obviously went to medical school and all that, so you're able to study data and reciprocate it to pass the tests. So you get all this data, and I guess if you've come up with the answer being, I'm going to follow XYZ religion versus being agnostic or atheist, given all this information, I'm coming up that me being atheist and agnostic, you have chosen the wrong data set. So I can't value you as
well. I don't think I get where you're going, but I don't think people have chosen the wrong data set. And I think, but maybe you mean you have given weight to certain evidence where you haven't, or something along those lines, because the data that you're talking about is often different categories of data, right? We've got, let's take the Francis Collins one, right? He gets data in the form of evidence of genetic sequencing. What are the actual, I forget what they're called, the GATCs in the DNA, I forget, but what are the actual letters that show up when we do this? And if I change one, what is the resulting behavior I see in the animal where I've changed it? Oh, look, I can make cats glow. Wow. Okay. So I reproduce that. And yeah, so now we know what this sequence does in this particular genome. That's one type of data. And then he goes in the forest, has a hike, and has this overwhelming feeling of belonging or higher power or whatever. That's another type of data. He's really good at analyzing the first, in my worldview. I think he's really good at analyzing the first, but I think he misattributed the cause of that feeling that he had when he was out in the woods. And maybe there's a deeper story. We're only hearing like what he wrote about in his book, but it's a different type of data, and he's just bad at analyzing that data in my worldview, and in his worldview, maybe I'm bad at analyzing my data when I have these feelings of happiness and music brings me to tears when I go see Wicked or something like that, right? So I don't think we're picking data sets. We are giving different data sets weights, and we're interpreting data. Do you agree with that, Josh? Oh, sorry, I had you on mute. Hold on, give me a second. Go ahead, Josh.
Completely agree. Agree. I think my whole thing is, let's just say different religions have different interpretations of creationism, where none of them seem to completely align with our scientific explanation of Darwinian evolution and Big Bang and all those different things. So if you've strongly chosen to believe the Christian, Catholic, or any of those Muslim forms of creationism as the one to hold on to as true, and that means you disbelieve the scientific explanation of where we are and how we got here, then I'm assuming you're not picking the best option. So maybe if there's a medical option to save my life that's the best one, how can I be certain you're going to pick the best option given this options?
Yeah, I get it. I think, and I'd love to hear John's thoughts on this. I think the question is not you're a bad picker. I think the observation is, in this realm, you don't have the tools to make a wise choice. But it is realm specific. I am a pretty darn good lawyer. I'm a pretty good project manager for software development. Those are the two things I've done in my life, right? I can make pretty good decisions when it comes to advising clients on legal issues, specifically with respect to FDA regulatory law, which is my background. Like, I'd say expert there. Software development, project management, pretty good at that too, right? As far as me making a good choice on the best way to reroute some waterways to get better irrigation to a tribe in Africa, I have no freaking clue. And maybe I'd go with my gut. Maybe I'd go with what makes sense, or maybe I'd turn and ask people. But those are different domains. And yeah, they'd be really bad. I wouldn't want my doctor teaching me how to play piano. I would want my doctor knowing how to cure my cancer or fix my broken arm. What are your thoughts, John?
Well, I think that being cognizant of, false authorities, people that are presenting themselves as authorities in a certain area, but they don't really have the expertise to, give informed opinions in that particular area. You find this a lot in creationism. Creationism, you have a lot of people that are not pretending to have expertise, but they claim to have expertise in an area of evolutionary biology, but they don't really, have that expertise there. And So I think that being cognizant of that is very important. Another important thing is that I would not hastily generalize people based on just being religious in general, because, like I said before, religious people, especially those that have been indoctrinated into faith early and have stuck with it, are great at compartmentalization. So, like, if you could be religious and still be like one of the smartest people in the room, and I mean, I'm fairly certain that like a lot of doctors that I've seen in the past have definitely been religious in some kind of way. But the thing that you want to focus on is making sure that they do not interject their religious beliefs into their care for you, or inserting their religious beliefs into some kind of advice that they're giving you that is not really applicable to what you're seeing them for. Unless you're seeing a priest specifically about religious theology, then you don't need to hear that from somebody.
Yeah. It would be a Saturday Night Live skit for you to go into the urgent care clinic with a sore throat and for the doctor to walk in and say, have you tried praying? Like, as the first thing. Like, that's not what happens. We don't see that in that. And if you did, you would probably be rightfully positioned to file some sort of complaint with their local medical ethics board, right? There are standards of care and you need to meet them. Otherwise, you could be sued for negligence. So I think that thank you very much, Josh, for your call. I think that it's interesting. I don't understand I guess I get it a little bit. It reminds me of, I don't know if you saw this recently, John, the flat earthers, right? These flat earth people that appear to be able to walk upright, chew gum, hold a job, raise a family, but they seem, at least some of them, Poe's law applies here, but they seem to believe that the earth is flat. And then recently we had some people who had some resources to say, hey, we'll take 4 of you, the most prominent flat earthers, the first 4 to accept, on a trip down to Antarctica, because you've all said on your various streams of media that if you could witness a sun that never sets, it would disprove flat earthism. And 4 of these leading flat earthers accepted, went down, set up 8 bajillion cameras looking at each other, all that sort of stuff. And sure enough, the sun never set. And one of them immediately said, that's it. I'm done. The flat earth is not flat. The next one said, wow, the sun never set. I don't know what that means. I leave that to you guys to figure out, but it's going to definitely cause me to go back to the drawing board, sort of implying that, well, I've got this preconceived notion. Maybe there's an engineering solution to it. And then the other 2 sort of remain silent. And what happened in the flat earth community? Immediately, the first and second guy, you are shills. One of them's a pastor. So the other pastors in the flat earth community started calling him a pastor for Satan, like all sorts of horrible stuff because you dare question what's going on. Those people are just really bad at processing certain types of data, evidence that contradicts one of their firmly held beliefs. And that's sort of religion in a nutshell.
Yeah, one of them was actually Jeranism, he's a prominent YouTuber here that did do, or I guess maybe still does. I think he's still a flat earther. He just needs a new map. But he was also in the Netflix documentary Beyond the Curve.
Beyond the Curve, wonderful movie.
Yeah, that one was pretty famous for having Jaren at a pretty central focus in the movie. But at the very end, they ran another experiment where they were testing like the curvature of the Earth, right? And they set up this experiment. It's like, well, if we see the light, then the Earth is flat. If we don't see the light, then it's not. And it's like they ran the experiment. They didn't see the light. They actually had to hold the light up a little bit more. And Jaren's just like, huh.
It is the best closing line of any movie ever is, huh.
But it took a special trip down to Antarctica to see the 24-hour
$35,000 to fly a guy down there and say, see? And one of them at least said, oh, You're right. And the rest of them were like, well, maybe, and different degrees of maybe. And then the community was instantly like, oh, look, part of his jacket is green, therefore green screen. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense because green actually removes green when you're using a chroma key. And they did all sorts of counter, like they were still down there when they started hearing all the conspiracy theories about you flew down to Antarctica where they have a globe. I hate to bring up the Sphere again, where you have a globe studio like the Sphere in Las Vegas, and you filmed all this in the Sphere. And people are like, the conspiracy is now that somebody built a studio in Antarctica to make it look like you're in Antarctica, but that the sun is like, it's insane. And this is the lengths that people will go to, either like I hinted at earlier. I think a lot of these people are just making money off of their views and they don't really believe this, but I do believe there's a good chunk of them that genuinely have been sucked in by this and believe it. But as I said, they hold jobs, they raise families, they pay their taxes, supposedly. Some of them didn't. In fact, I think that was a controversy in the Beyond the Curve movie. They walk upright. They have enough money to buy cameras and phones, and there's some part of their life that's in a section of their brain where they are not skeptical. And I would do the same thing for Jeff's call, that there are some doctors out there who are just like, I don't know. They can, and another point, sorry to go on about this. Another point is I can check the box for Christian and be on a huge spectrum of belief. Like I'm Christian, which means to me, I generally think that there's some good driving force in the world. And yeah, I go to church every once in a while. That's how I was raised, versus the Bible's literally true and it's 5,000 years old earth and blah, blah, blah. But like there's a huge spectrum. So just because a physician says I'm Christian doesn't mean you know a lot about what their belief system is like for that part of their brain. What are your thoughts, John? Sorry to rant about that a bit.
Oh, no. Me being from North Alabama, I'm surrounded by religious people, and I live in a city that has the highest number of degrees compared to like the population. And so
really?
Well, yeah.
Like
so
the
Huntsville,
highest degree per capita?
I
like
guess
an
so.
advanced degree, yeah.
Well, yeah. So I don't know
What's
if it's
down there?
the highest. Well, it's Huntsville, Alabama. So there's Redstone Arsenal, and then we have a whole bunch of contractors and everything like that out there. It's a really big,
so a lot of engineers.
town.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, practically to have a job in Huntsville in this particular area, you have to have a degree of some sort.
Sure.
So most of these people are religious, and they're really smart. Like all of them are really smart, and so like. I think writing someone off just because they are religious is wrong. And I think that taking into consideration that like most of the time, if you're an atheist, you were religious at one point, but that doesn't mean that you like all of a sudden got smart or something like that. You were still smart. You just asked different questions and came to different conclusions. And I just don't think that anybody should make any kind of like personal judgments just based on the fact that they believe in something. Judge people on their actions and their demeanor rather than just simply on what they believe. Depending on the belief, I have to say
yes.
Depending on the belief, you don't judge them simply on belief.
I can't stand those memes. They're like, "Hey, can't we all just get along?" And I'm like, "Well, no, some of us can't, and it's their fault."
there are certain positions that I will definitely judge the fuck out of you for.
No, but I totally agree with you. I have very good friends who are religious, very smart people. It's just that they put that box in a part of their brain and they apply different rules to it than other things, and they can be artists and they can be physicians and they can be engineers. So it takes all types. I'll quote Shannon Q, who was on a rant for years to try to say, hey, atheists should stop calling religious people crazy, and I fully agree with that. You're not crazy, you're just wrong about this one thing, in my opinion, right? You don't, when asked, I've never had anybody present me with sufficient evidence to support the claims they believe, but they still believe them, and I think that's wrong. So that's where I come in. I don't care about that until you start, Project 2025 or taking over the government or putting the 10 Commandments in front of kids and trying to prevent people from getting medical care and all sorts of forms of medical care in the name of your God. So that's the real problem. So as far as a doctor who's wearing a cross when they cure my cancer, did they cure my cancer? I don't care that they're wearing a cross.
Yeah,
more power to them.
exactly.
And for years, the Catholic hospitals were the best hospitals in the world. So there you go.
Well, yeah,
and
because
Jesus was a healer.
Yeah, well, well, I mean, the Catholic organization has had like the most capital and the most ability to like, do those things. So it makes sense that they would be able to do those things.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're wrapping up the show. I have a few more super chats to get through here. We've got Nero, member for a year, gave $5. He said, I don't fear religion. I do fear that all but 2 of my family, if forced to choose, would choose a fictional monster god and its vile rules over me. This one, when I read it, when we were seeing the super chats, it sort of broke my heart. My heart goes out to you, Nero. I hate that you're in a position where you feel like that. Remember, you don't choose your family, but you choose your friends. So make your own family. I hope you're in a place where you're safe. It sounds like you do have 2 members of your family that support you in whatever you're going through. The next one we have is another one from Laren Misha Sadai, new member for $5. Discount Darth Vader calls into the show in short phrases. What was his name? I forget the name. The guy, the coward. Genesis guy.
Oh, Gemini.
I think they're talking about the short phrase guy. Yeah. Genesis 1.
Yeah.
Pray and find out.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's discount Darth Vader is the way we're going to 100% call them. And then Nero gave another $5. Thank you, Nero, again. Chat GPT gained sentience. This is the same call. Chat GPT gained sentience and converted to Christianity before calling to pester us. Damn.
Well, so Chat GPT has much better voices than the one they called through. I'm just saying, like.
Mentioning ChatGPT, I've seen a lot of videos now on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and all that of Christians making the argument, ChatGPT says X, therefore my argument is true. And it's the most mind-blowing, ignorant, I'm not trying to insult you, but just you have no idea what you're talking about thing. And they're getting lots of views from lots of people.
Oh, yeah. I remember I made a post, I think, on Blue Sky, and somebody came back with, oh, well, ChatGPT says that Jesus actually existed. So boom. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much for sending me screen caps from ChatGPT. I should have thought of that before I opened my mouth.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right. Well, John, I had an absolute wonderful time. You're always a wonderful person to talk to personally before the show and after the show. And the way that you interact with callers is great. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, just over on Godless Engineer here on YouTube. Okay. Is pretty much where I live at. Anywhere on social media, I'm Godless Engineer. So y'all can find me there.
I'm the cross examiner, same thing. So I really appreciate your time. This, again, for everybody out there, please do remember that this is a 501c3 charity. We don't get paid. The crew doesn't get paid. We're here to try to convince people that they should be more skeptical, especially in the relation to the separation of church and government. So if you like what we do, please do give us more super chats. Go over to the Patreon, go to our website to find out more. But until next week, please have fun, whatever you do. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's setting up your business, what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.